I think I might have just discovered the best way to learn track stands. If you're stopped on the street or on the trail and you don't want to put your feet down, there's a technique for that, and it's called track standing. A track stand is when we balance in place on the bike, but it's not a static movement. We don't grab both brakes and hold on as long as we can. It's this simple back and forth, and we use our body positioning and our pedal pressure to keep the bike moving just subtly back and forth to stay balanced. My name is Aaron, and you might recognize me from the Super Rider channel, but today I'm working with Jenson USA to help you break down some complex bike skills into easy to learn techniques that you can quickly apply to your riding. Today we're going to be breaking down the track stand technique. Before we get into all the little details of the track stand technique and how to practice it, let's just go through some of the basics. When we're standing on the bike, our shoulders are pretty much squared up over the handlebars, and we're focused in on two things, our front brake and our pedal pressure. Learning those two elements and getting this back and forth motion locked in is basically what's going to allow you to track stand indefinitely. Most people, as they're learning the track stand skill, try to immediately focus in on the balance part of it. But if you see me balancing in place, you see the bike moving backwards and forwards, and that backwards element is probably the one bit that most people don't understand. So let's learn how to roll backwards, first by using a skill called the endo. The endo is when we roll along slow and we stop all of our forward momentum by grabbing the front brake. Our back wheel lifts off the ground, and as it lands back down on the ground, we do a quick back pedal and we try to shift our weight backwards to create backwards momentum on the bike. This takes a little bit of time to practice, but just get comfortable with a small endo where your weight shifts forward a little bit and then shift your weight back when you land. Just one back pedal, and maybe just put your foot down on the ground after that to steady yourself. We're not going to need to backpedal a bunch of times in a row. We just need to get the feeling for moving backwards and using our hips specifically to do that. While you were practicing that rollback technique, you might have accidentally uncovered the next step in the practice that we're going to do, and that's using our pedal pressure to stop the backwards momentum of that wheel. So if you don't backpedal enough, your back wheel will catch and it will stop moving backwards, and you can use your pedal pressure to again push the bike forward. And that's exactly the next thing we're going to do, because if you see me do that track stand, I roll back and then I push forward. I roll back and then forward, and that's the basics of this skill. So let's try this. Let's do the endo. We'll do a little rollback and then we'll push on the pedals to get the bike moving forward. And this is how we learn that back and forth motion. Now that you've got the basics of that back and forth movement using the rollback plus the pedal pressure to get that back and forth movement happening, we can move on to the next step in this technique, which is to find an immovable obstacle where we can start working on our actual track stand form. So what you're going to do is find this immovable obstacle. You're going to twist your front wheel away from your front foot, and you're going to push it into that obstacle using a combination of pedal pressure and your front brake. And in this position, you can actually lean into that immovable obstacle, and you should be totally fine to stand there indefinitely. It shouldn't actually take any real balance as long as you have your pedal pressure going and your front brake. So I've got my immovable obstacle here. I'm going to use a log that I found at the trailhead. I've got my front wheel twisted into the log away from my front foot. I'm going to grab my front brake and then I'm going to stand up on the bike, which is going to add pressure to the pedals. This is exactly the form that we need for this technique, with our shoulders squared up over the handlebars, our feet pushing on the pedals, and our front brake locked in. So what you can do from here is just get comfortable in this position. This is where you're going to be, and we're going to build a little bit of muscle memory by just hanging out here. When you're comfortable and slightly bored of being in this position, we're going to move on to the next step, which is rolling back from the immovable obstacle. So what we're going to do to get that done is we're going to put our hips all the way into the handlebars, and as we pull our hips away from the handlebars, we're going to let go of the front brake and back pedal at the same time. Don't worry about adding the pedal pressure just yet. Let's just focus on our movement from having our hips in the front of the bike to quickly moving it to the back while we let go of the front brake and back pedal, just like this. The next thing we need to do when we get comfortable with the rollback is start adding back in the pedal pressure. And this pushes our front wheel back into place. That's the next part of this whole phase. So we've done the rollback, then we push on the pedals to push the front wheel back in place. So again, hips into the handlebars, roll back, pedal pressure to put yourself back in place. This is sort of the last phase of learning the track stand technique, because once you figured out how to roll away from the obstacle and use pedal pressure to go back into that obstacle, the next step is for you to come away from the obstacle and use your front brake instead. So what I'm going to do now that I'm away from that immovable obstacle, I'm going to grab my front brake and then back pedal, and then put pedal pressure in, grab the front brake, back pedal, and you're doing the exact same thing that you did with that immovable obstacle, but now you're track standing. Now that you understand the basics of the track stand technique, there's a few tips that you'll often hear, and the most common one is practicing on a slight uphill. The reason why that's helpful is that the angle of the hill will actually assist your rollback. It will cause you to roll back down it, and that's going to help you with this rollback function that we're working on. So here's what we're going to do. I found an empty parking spot at my local trailhead that has a slight uphill to it. I'm going to back my truck in, and we're going to use the wheel of my truck as the immovable obstacle, and we're going to use that slight uphill to assist with our rollback. And just like that, you've got the perfect track stand practice setup. Now, even though we're on this slight uphill and we have our immovable obstacle, make sure that you're also paying close attention to where your body is over the handlebars and how your pedals interact with the rest of the bike. This pedal pressure is a really important part of the track stand. When you're feeling confident and ready to progress, let's move a few feet away from the truck and just see if we can do the track stand on this slight uphill. Now, the way to think about this is that we were using this obstacle to stop our bike in place, reset so that we could backpedal out of it. But actually, the front brake does the exact same thing. So here we pushed into it, reset, backpedaled, then used pedal pressure to push into it, rinse and repeat. Here, what we're gonna do is just grab our front brake, reset, and then backpedal out of it, then push pedal pressure, front brake, rinse and repeat. It's the same exact thing, it's just a little bit scarier because you don't have something that's super solid to lean into. I think you're going to progress faster than you think because you've been doing this exact same motion. You're just swapping the obstacle for your front brake. Now you know everything there is to know about balancing in place, how to do it, what goes into it, and most importantly, how to progress with it. Go out there, have fun, and don't forget, practice makes progress.